You know, people applaud at concerts in the same way that you applauded here. Recognize greatness. Sometimes it's human greatness, but hopefully in this place it is divine greatness that we are acknowledging and recognizing. That's what worship is. Thank you for being here this morning. I'm going to invite you to be seated. We're going to continue our worship service. My name is Chris Rainey, and I will be doing a message today entitled The Resilience of the Righteous. The text is Proverbs 24, 15, and 16. It's been a good week here in the New York metropolitan area with the cancellation of congestion pricing. God has intervened on the behalf of New Jersey. Everyone who lives here, I think, is probably happy about that. But those cameras are already in place, so it'll be back, folks. It'll be back at some point. So get ready. Proverbs 24, 15, and 16 says this. Do we have slides? Okay. Do not lie in wait like an outlaw against the home of the righteous. Do no violence to the place where the righteous live. For though they fall 7 times, they will rise again. But the wicked are overthrown by calamity. Resilience. It's the capacity to withstand or recover from difficulties. Sometimes we use the word toughness. Sometimes we use the word courage or passion. All of these play into this idea of being a resilient person. It also refers to the ability of an object to spring back into shape after it's been, pulled out of shape. I do a lot of laundry, so it made me think of pantyhose at my house, because the pantyhose, that you pull them out of the washer and sometimes they're stuck, and you pull them out and it's like 8 feet long, and then you let go of it and it goes right back into shape. It's amazing. That's what resilience is. It's being stretched and then being able to be put back into shape. So the synonym for resilience might be toughness. A little bit later I'll say it's grit. It's also used in other contexts. Resilience means in a supply chain, to have one source of the supply maybe gets knocked out, and then another one can pick up where it took off. We found in COVID that we did not have a resilient supply chain, right? We couldn't get parts for our cars. Most things were being made in China. We had focused on efficiency. We had focused on low cost, but now we no longer had resilience in our supply chain because we couldn't get what we needed. Resilience means when something is affected, then it bounces back in some other way. Technology resilience is another way in which we use the word resilience. So most technology companies, they have multiple data centers. I work at UPS. When I go in the building, I go into a data center, and if that data center goes down, we will just point everyone in the company and our customers to a different data center that I'm not allowed to disclose where it is. Can't tell you that because it's top secret information. There might be 2 of them. I'm not sure now. But technology resilience. Does some of you remember using technology many years ago when there was not an undo function in word processing? Does anyone remember that? You remember WordPerfect 5.1? I worked in college in a computer lab, and my job was to help students who were writing papers and stuff, and the only thing we had was WordPerfect. I don't think you could do anything else in the computer. We'd spend $2,000 on a computer to get WordPerfect. Remember those days? The good old days? And students would be typing along, and then someone would raise their hand, and I'd go over and I'd say, I just lost my whole document. I'd say, well, it's too bad. You have to start over again. There's nothing I can do. That's what computer support was in those days. It was telling people it couldn't be done. Couldn't happen. There was no recovery from that. Remember when there was not a recycle bin in your computer? You deleted something, it was gone forever. You couldn't go get it. There was no way. It was over. Thank God for resilient technology. Thank God that times have changed and mistakes are not, permanent in that way. What's resilience look like for human beings? An article that I found on LinkedIn by Abd Bashir pointed out 4 kinds of resilience that people typically look at in human beings. Number 1 is psychological resilience. That's the mental capacity to deal with uncertainty and change and all those sort of things. Some people call it mental fortitude. There's emotional resilience, where you're able to manage your emotions when you are hit with some adverse situation. You are not overwhelmed. You manage your anger, you manage your fear, you manage your vulnerability, you manage your sadness in emotional resilience. There's physical resilience, when your body is challenged in some way. And you get older, you experience this often. You experience this quite a bit. And I'm getting the age where there's a lot of people that I call to help me, with my physical situations and all, to keep me going. You'll get there. You all get there. Trust me. So you try to live a healthy lifestyle so that there is resilience built into the body. And then the last one is social resilience. And this generally refers to a group of people who've experienced some sort of adversity together, such as a tornado going through a community. And how does that community recover from the adversity? That's the idea of resilience. There's a book written in the past 5 years or so by a woman named Angela Duckworth, and it's called Grit, the Power and Passion of Perseverance. And she talks about West Point cadets. West Point, New York. Some of you may know that West Point is not too far up north of Bear Mountain, and that's where our Army commissioned officers are trained at West Point, so they go through the 4-year program. They start applying for this program their junior year. Approximately 14,000 students, high school juniors, every year apply to be a West Point cadet. They have to have top ACT scores or SAT scores. They have to get nominated by a congressman or a senator or a vice president of the United States can nominate someone to go to West Point, but you have to have that nomination or you cannot be accepted at West Point. Of the 14,000, 1,200 are accepted into the program. Nearly all of them who were selected were high school athletes. Nearly all of them were captains of their high school sport teams that they played on. So these are the best of the best that apply to West Point. 1,200 of the 14,000 are selected to attend. And of the 1,200, only 1 in 5 complete the program. 1 in 5. And most of them drop out during the first summer program that they go to. It's called Beast. And they get up at 5 a.m., they go to bed at 10 p.m., and there's all sorts of military-like things that's designed to sort of point out their vulnerabilities, to their weaknesses, to see if they have the resilience that they need to go through the program. Angela Duckworth did research on these West Point cadets and determined through surveys and observation that the thing that made the difference in who made it through, the 1 in 5, what was that one person, what did they have that the other people didn't have? She determined that the thing that they had was called grit. Grit is perseverance, resilience, courage, passion, and conscientiousness. All of those things were present in these cadets that was not present in the others. Every one of them were talented. Of the 14,000 people that applied, they were all highly talented. Of the 1,200, they were highly talented, but only 20% of them had that quality of grit, what we might call in our context resilience. So this morning, the big idea of this message is that God gives grit to his people. God gives resilience to his people. Now, some people who look at this text, this proverb, discuss whether it's more generally referencing trials and tests, or whether it's specifically referring to sins and moral failings that people fall into and can't get up from. I think it's all of the above. And I think that God gives resilience to people not only when they are experiencing something that has come from outside of them, some adversity that's been thrust upon them, And he also gives resilience to those who have, by their own failings, have put themselves in a situation where they are what we might call suffering from self-inflicted wounds. God gives resilience to his people. We're going to look at two main ideas today. Number one, the resilience of the righteous in verse 16a, and the weakness of the wicked in verse 16b. So let's start out. Number one, let's look at the resilience of the righteous in verse 16a. It says, "For the righteous falls 7 times and rises again." The word for righteous there is a Hebrew word, sadiq, which is a cognate of a word that throughout the Bible refers to righteousness. So there's a number of different ways it's spoken of, and in this context it refers to people who are considered righteous. And if we think about this from New Testament people, we are called saints, we are called righteous, not our own righteousness necessarily, but it is the righteousness that has been applied to our lives. And so I think it makes sense for us to look at this as in our era, the person of faith is who it's describing here that has this kind of resilience that we're talking about. In an article entitled "4 Spiritual Truths Proven by Science to Build Resilience," Kent Anand and Jamie Ayton, they both started to study disasters and what made people resilient in experiencing different kinds of disasters. And so here's the 4 truths that they identified that help people recover from these devastating disasters, devastating losses in life. Number 1, community. From 2015 flooding in South Carolina, which displaced a number of people, they found that people who had positive spiritual support were more likely to recover from a disaster like that. Spiritual surrender is the second truth. They said that when looking at Hurricane Katrina, the people who had high levels of spiritual surrender, they acknowledged God in their lives, tended to recover better than those who did not. Third, seeking positive meaning in their loss. People who understood that suffering and all of these kinds of things that happen to us, these adverse conditions, still can contribute to positive meaning. They can still find positive meaning in it in the overall context of their lives. Those people also had resilience. And finally, those who trusted that God could redeem their pain. And the example they gave, and this was in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where a community had been wiped out due to a volcanic eruption where lava and ash just went through and wiped away their village. Those people went back and rebuilt using the ash and all of in the same place where they were before in the midst of that. And this kind of trust that God was helping them to do this was what made a difference in their ability to recover. So the co-author of this article said that she became interested in this idea because she moved to New Orleans 6 days before Hurricane Katrina came, and so she was just sort of thrust into this environment where everyone was dealing with a disaster. And she saw a clear connection in her life between people who had faith and people who didn't, and how their resilience played out. John Maxwell, who was a pastor and he's a leadership author, wrote a book called Failing Forward. And here's what he said in that book about failing, which is, adversity is one form of failure, and we may experience failure in it, but it's necessary. He said, failing forward refers to the acceptance of failure as a stepping stone to future success. That you have chosen to respect each failure for the lesson it teaches you, and to apply those lessons to future efforts, even if those efforts may also fail. Each failure brings you closer to ultimate success when you're failing forward. And what we actually find is that many people who write books about success and who go around and talk about how successful they are, right? Oftentimes, those people have had a series of failures that lead up to those successes. And I think that's important. And as I was, when I'm going to do a message, I get up in the morning, I drink my cup of coffee, and I look over my notes just, try to remember what I was going to say. And I started thinking about, different things that in my life that would be considered, failures or adversity that I've experienced. And I came up with a list here, and I'd like just to run through a few of them that stood out to me. And the first one, when I tried out for basketball in the 8th grade, the first thing that we did was we got in a line and we ran and we jumped and we touched the net, and then we would run back to the end of the line. That was all we had to do. When I did it, I ran, I touched the net, and my finger just caught in the net and it threw me off, and I landed like this and I broke my wrist trying out for 8th grade basketball. I was a pretty good basketball player, but that ended that. That was over. Second, when I was a sophomore in high school, I was promoted to the varsity in the 3rd game of the season, and I started as quarterback for the rest of that season. We went 4-2 during that time. I did very well, and I was going to be the starting. I had set up that I was going to be the starting quarterback 2 more years. So I would have been 3 years. I would have been the starting varsity quarterback. And in the summer after that sophomore season, I got in a fight with someone, and I punched him in the face and broke my thumb. So then I became the backup quarterback the rest of my high school career because I was unable to recover in time, and then they moved on because people move on without you. I've actually been in about 3 fights, and I broke my thumb every time, so there's some flaw that is in my technique that I've got to work on. So if any of you can help me with my it's a hook. My hook is the problem. So after high school then, because I was very sports-oriented, I had to find a new thing to do, so I started running. And I started running 40 miles a week. I started running 10K races, and I ran a half marathon. I ran a half marathon in 1 hour and 19 minutes, which is actually pretty good. So my plan, my plan to honor God was always involved self-glorification first, and then God would get part of the credit, was that I was going to join the Marine Corps and run on the track team, and that's how my path to greatness would go. But while I was in boot camp in the Marine Corps, I injured my knee. They had to take the cartilage out, and the one thing I pretty much can't do, physically anymore is I can't run distances. I had to stop doing that. So that's another thing that was, kind of taken away as you go through life and you experience things, and these things you lose or have to recover from. Another thing that happened, Marcia and I got married. The first 7 years of our marriage, my income went down every single year. 7 straight years. So I said she thought she was getting a quarterback, and she got a guy who was, floundering as he was going through life. We applied to be missionaries. We went all the way to the end of the process. I said, I feel like we're supposed to go here. The head of foreign missions said, we want you to go here. We never could come to an agreement, and so we pulled our application and stopped that process. By the time I was 36 years old, everyone that I'd grown up with in my family at home had died. They were all gone. In my career at UPS, from 2010 to 2014, I applied for 7 jobs within the company. I did not get any of them. 7 interviews, and I didn't get any of the jobs. I've had 4 biopsies because of potential health issues in my life. I've had 3 to 4 headaches a month for most of my adult life. I still don't know why. I get those. And then the last thing that happened last year that I'll mention, that I went to Constitution Park in Fort Lee on my lunch hour. I was going up there and doing chin-ups at the playground. There's a lot of people that go to the free gym, which is an elementary school, a playground, Constitution Park. You don't have to pay for that, so I go there a lot to work out. And so I was doing chin-ups, and an elderly Asian man was there, and he was impressed that I could do chin-ups. He said, that's really good. And then he got up and he did about 3, and he told me he was 82, and I said, well, That might be more impressive than what I'm doing. I thought in my head, I didn't tell him that. And then he said, come over here. And then he put his arm down on a flat circular thing, and he said, let's arm wrestle. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna break his arm. I'm gonna do all these chin-ups. And then we went at it, and he put me down. He pinned me. He beat me in arm wrestling. An 82-year-old man beat me in arm wrestling. That is humiliating to have that happen to you. So that was a few of the experiences of my life with adversity, and you just have to get up and go on. You have to get up and go on. Here's what Matthew Henry said in the complete commentary on the whole Bible about this passage. He said, the righteous man whose ruin was expected recovers himself. He falls 7 times into trouble, but by the blessing of God upon his wisdom and integrity, he rises again, sees through his troubles, and sees better times after them. The just man sometimes falls 7 times, perhaps into sins of infirmity, through the surprise of temptation, but he rises again by repentance, finds mercy with God, and regains his peace. The righteous man falls 7 times, but he rises again. The word here is also used in the New Testament quite a bit. It's the same word for rising up, getting up, same related word for resurrection. And I looked at a few New Testament examples of people who were kind of down and got up and went on. And Matthew, who is the tax collector, also known as Levi, here's what it says. It says, as Jesus passed by, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting in a tax booth, and he said to him, follow me. And he rose and followed him. And we can say that Matthew was sort of down and out. He was a tax collector, which was like the worst profession for a Jew, because you were sort of a traitor to your people, because you were collecting from your people to give to the Romans. And that was not a good profession. Everyone hated those people who were tax collectors. And yet he rises up and he follows Jesus. The prodigal son, what does he say when he's squandered all of the wealth that he inherited from his father and he'd gone out and lived immorally? He says, I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. He got up, he rose up and went back home to his father. The Apostle Paul, before he was Paul, he was known as Saul of Tarsus, and he was knocked off the horse and blinded, and he was sitting in a house waiting for what was going to happen next. He had been knocked down by Jesus, we might say. He had been, knocked out of everything that he had been doing before, and he was blind and waiting for what was going to happen. And it says that a man named Ananias came to pray for him, and immediately something like scales fell from his eyes. He regained his insight. He rose and was baptized. He got up out of the chair, out of the situation he was in, and he changed and was brand new. A righteous man falls 7 times, but he rises again. So here in this proverb, we see the resilience of the righteous. We also see in this proverb the weakness of the wicked. We also see the weakness of the wicked. The Septuagint version translates this passage this way. It says that the wicked are without strength in troubles. And, when someone who's not a person of faith, they don't have the resources to rely upon. So these kind of situations in life tend to be harder on them. They're more unlikely to recover. So the opposite effect here, we might look and say, what's the opposite of what we said earlier? Well, the way that you don't recover from these situations is that you lack community. You lack a surrounding group to help you through it. You fail to surrender to God. You are unable to see positive meaning in your loss, and you are not sure that this pain that you're in can be redeemed. You see it as hopeless. You see yourself as helpless to deal with the things that are going on. The opening psalm makes a clear distinction between the righteous and the wicked, and it sounds very similar to what we're reading here, where it says of the righteous, they are like trees planted in Psalm 1, planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in season. Their leaves do not wither. In all that they do, they prosper. The wicked are not so. They are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. So it makes a clear distinction between people of faith and people not of faith here. And I guess the question is, what has happened to you when you have faced adversity like this? Because we all face these kind of things in life. And what's happened to you? Have you been dealt a knockout blow? Have you been just something has happened to you that has made you stuck where you got knocked down and you were never able to recover from it? Or have you been able to rise again repeatedly, as it says here? I looked up the most knockdowns in a boxing match, and it found out that the most ever was a man was knocked down 14 times in a boxing match. It was not Rocky Balboa, by the way. He might have been knocked down, but that's fictional. You know, it's not real. Most of you may be aware of that, but he's not a real person, Rocky Balboa. It was a guy named Danny O'Sullivan. You know, a couple of weeks ago I said the Irish have the top name with Liam. Now the Irish are back again. Most knockdowns in a boxing match was an Irishman named Danny O'Sullivan of London. 14 times in 10 rounds he was knocked down, and he did not win the fight, as you can imagine. So his knockdowns were keeping him down. The Times of India had an article recently on what makes people mentally weak. And here's what it says. It says that they avoid challenges, they accept defeat easily and give up, they constantly doubt themselves, they dwell on past mistakes a lot, and they're afraid of changes because they fear adapting to changes. And I guess this may describe people who've been knocked down, and you don't want to experience being knocked down again, so you just kind of fall into this sort of a scenario where you just accept where you are and you don't try to rise again. But the Bible, of course, here is telling us that when you get knocked down, that you have the resources available to you to help you to rise up again. That's what faith is. That's what trusting Jesus is. That's what hope is. That's what this is all about, this life of faith. I'm going to invite the worship team to make their way back. This is a Proverbs, only 2 verses we're looking at, so it can't be that long. We've looked at the resilience of the righteous, and we've looked at the weakness of the wicked. I want to mention another quote from a commentary. Here's what Adam Clark said about this. He says, though God permits the hand of violence sometimes to attack his tent, temptations to assail his mind, and afflictions to press down his body, the righteous one constantly emerges, and every time he passes through the furnace, he comes out brighter and more refined. So this promise of being able to be resilient is for those who struggle with addictions. It's for those who struggle with secret sins. It's for those who just feel like you've not been successful in any of your endeavors in life. It's for you. God is able to work in you in those situations. And oftentimes the failures, as John Maxwell mentioned, are the ways that God uses to move you forward, not backwards. It's not unusual to have these things. We often only talk about people's successes and their greatnesses and all of that. But behind every success, I would imagine there are numerous failures that people have gone through to get to that point where they are. What did Jesus say about this idea? Well, he exemplified it. He said that he was going to be handed over, delivered to the Gentiles. They're going to mock on him, spit on him, and kill him. And yet he told his disciples, but I'm going to rise again in 3 days. He said they're going to knock me down 14 times, and I'm going to get up every single time, and I'm going to go to the cross. That's what he did. And then we are born into that same hope, that hope of the resurrection. The Apostle Peter called it a living hope, where he said that we are born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. So it's all about resurrection. So though our dreams get knocked down, though our dreams get dashed, we can resurrect those dreams. We can resurrect in different ways that God brings us back from the brink. So the question I have for you this morning is, do you demonstrate in your life a resilience that comes from faith? How do you respond to adversity? What happens when you are knocked down? What happens when things don't go your way? Jesus fell down carrying the cross on the way to Golgotha. He fell down, but he got back up. He fell down, and Simon of Cyrene carried the cross for him, so Jesus could get up and walk without the weight of that on him. He had a community that was supporting him. He did not stay down. He did not stay dead. He rose again. He triumphed over death. And so Jesus modeled what it means for us to be resilient. God has made available his resilience to each one of you. Are you living a resilient life? Or are you living a life where you've been knocked down and you've not gotten back up? God is calling you to arise and follow him. Let's pray. God, I know there are people in this room that you are speaking to right now. Some who've been hit with blows very hard, and they didn't expect it, and they've not figured out how to get past it. And I pray that you'll just show them today what you can do. I pray to thank you for those in this room that I've seen over many years to be so resilient and to face life's challenges and to get back up again. And we just thank you today, Lord, for the example you set for us by rising from the dead and making a way for us. Because you live, we too shall live. Because you rise, we too shall rise. And so, Lord, today we trust in that. And we thank you for that. And it's in Jesus' name. And if you're here this morning and you feel like you want to bring something that is some adversity, some situation in your life that you've struggled with, you want to bring it to the altar, kneel down and pray, we invite you to come forward. We invite you to come and lay your burden down and allow Jesus to help you so that you can rise up. Amen.